like that was Seamus Coleman's 300th start for Everton. Now, if you're going to go back to 2010 when he started kind of getting into the team, I don't think anyone really or kind of really saw him becoming such a mainstay player for Ireland, for Everton, and for him to kind of be the last survivor since the last time Everton actually bet Liverpool. Considering the fact that he was rode off time and time again after his leg break, and he's came back time and time again after people have called him finished. People have said he's out past his best. He might be past his best, but he's still a very, very good player and still a very important squad member, as he shown yesterday, because he was played out of position in the game last night and he was doing a job on Andy Robertson, to man mark him. And I thought he'd done it really, really well. And that's why I think you can't have an Ireland team without Seamus Coleman in it. Simple as. Wherever you play him, whether that be right midfield or right back or whatever, you have to have him in that team. If he's fit, of course, but he has to be in that team for the bigger games.
Yeah, well, I mean, you want 300 starts. As the song goes, I think he's probably the best Everton bargain signing, pound for pound, of all time. I'm sure Sligo Rovers wish they could have got a lot more for him. But some deal for Everton. Yeah, I mean, he may be past his best, but Seamus's best was simply superb, and he is still a top player. And I mean, I suppose we won't have an Ireland squad without Seamus Coleman for quite a while if he's fit. And I don't think we'll have an Irish team without Seamus Coleman next month if he's fit as well. I think he will play in Belgrade, probably not in... well, interesting, you said he was there to do a man marking job on Andy Robertson, which he did very well. But he also seemed to play in midfield, which... I wonder, is that given Stephen Kenny ideas? Because I know we talked about this before, and I certainly never considered Seamus Coleman for midfield. The obvious position to play him is right back or right wing back, and the other position we had talked about was on the right of a three, and possibly they could move inside there in the way that something like Cesar Azpilicueta has done for Chelsea. He's gone from being from a full back or a wing back to being one of three centre backs. So I certainly didn't consider Seamus to be in midfield. Maybe Stephen Kenny will be looking at that now. But for me, I probably say with his experience and everything, and with cool heads, particularly in Belgrade, I think he'll be playing right back in Belgrade. And maybe it's Matt Doherty who could be slotted in somewhere else.
Well, I would prefer Doherty to play further forward because I think he's better in an attacking sense. But if it is a case if Doherty is playing right back and Seamus Coleman is still playing right mid, because he did play against Spurs as well, and that was another game which he came on and he helped get the team results as well against Spurs, the 1-5-4 in the FA Cup last week. And I thought he played quite well. He didn't do anything amazing, but what he did do was he was always a runner, he was always an option, and he was energetic and he got about the pitch. And that's something I think in an Irish team we lack, a lot of mobility. Maybe not with the younger lads that have come in recently, but before that, I mean, a lot of our players, they were stuck in the mud a lot of the time. But Seamus, when he played against Liverpool and when he played against Spurs, I did really think that he's got that bite back about him, he's got that energy back about him. And, he did come into play in the last round of internationals, even though he was probably too soon to come back, but that just shows how much he wants to play for Ireland. I think David Moyler done a piece on Off the Ball on that during the week, but I just think that if Seamus is still playing in the midfield position coming up to the qualifiers in a month's time, I think the only reason he's been playing kind of right midfield is because Mason Holgate has the pace to stay with players like Mane and whoever was playing left wing for Spurs. I think because he struggled against Ademola Lookman playing right back, because he is just electric, and obviously he won the game for Fulham against Sheffield United there last night as well. He's a very, very tricky player, but I don't think Serbia have anyone kind of up to his standards, so I think he'd be fine for right back purposes. But if he keeps playing midfield for Everton for the next month, I think he could potentially play as a right midfielder, and if Doherty's playing for Spurs as a right back, which is weird because I would totally switch the two of them if I'm looking at it. But if, for the sake of continuity, and Seamus actually started his career as a right midfielder for Everton. in his very early days. I know he's on loan at Blackpool, but do you not remember the famous argument that he had on Twitter with Phil Neville about doing all his running and stuff like that? He had a famous. I wouldn't say a spat. I think it was more banter, and it kind of got a little when he was very, very young. Now he's only 20 or 21, and himself, Phil Neville, had a bit of a run in on Twitter. They were teammates at the time, and he was saying he used to do all his running and stuff for him. So he has played there. He is familiar in that position, but I just think that Matt Doherty would be better in an attacking sense. I think he is better attacking players than he is defending players. I think Seamus is better at defending, but the thing about Seamus is he could do both if needs be. So I suppose in some ways it's a good headache to have for Stephen, and I'm sure it's something that he's looking at and saying, you know what, maybe if I need to be defensive, I could play the two of them, and whatever way he wants to do it, he might have Doherty playing right full and Seamus just in front of him, but as a defensive winger more so than an attacking winger, and maybe have on the left hand side someone like Aaron Connolly who maybe doesn't have to drop back as much and can stay high up the pitch. That may be something he's looking at, I don't know, but it's good to have the option, I think.
Yeah, I actually think it's what I probably expect is more, given Stephen plays 4-3-3, I'm not sure if he would actually play Seamus or Matt in the three in midfield. But you mentioned as an attacker and possibly playing Matt Doherty as the right, on the right of the three, maybe with Callum Robinson and Aaron Connolly as the other two. Because that's where there's probably a vacancy, if you want, or there isn't an obvious contender. Whereas we have quite a lot of contenders for the midfield spots. And I'm not sure. I know you mentioned them before.
Not to cut you off, Gary, but just on that, because I think it's something that we should discuss as well. You know, that right wing position was going very well for Robbie Brady up until recently when he played Chelsea. I think it was when he had that infamous. He couldn't keep up with Callum Hudson-Odoi or whatever he said to Sean Dyche, and since then he's played terribly. But he would have been nailed on for that right wing position for me. I wouldn't say a winger, but you know what I mean. That right side, cutting in and whipping balls in, because he was playing very well for Burnley. And then last week he had an absolute nightmare. You think he was subbed on and subbed off in the same game.
Yeah, and I think he could have an injury in that as well. And so I suppose you're right. Robbie would be. Well, I think we've talked about it before. He's somebody who I think we need to get on the pitch with set pieces, or if not, Conor O'Reilly. Of course, Conor O'Reilly is in flying form, so he probably will be on the pitch now in Belgrade. Fingers crossed that he doesn't pick up an injury or anything in the meantime. Yeah, so Robbie Brady is a good shout for that, as you say, cutting in his left foot. But he has probably a few positions he could play. Anything from left wing back to left side or even right side of a midfield three as well. So it's probably a case we'll see who's fit and available. I think Matt Doherty is an option for that right of a front three. I'd probably be more comfortable with Seamus at right back, particularly in Belgrade. Maybe have Matt at right back at home to Luxembourg when we're obviously going to be on the front foot a lot more. But I would expect us to be on the back foot a lot against Serbia. And look, Seamus's experience, his cool head, and just his overall organisational ability, his defensive nous, etc. He is the person for me to be playing at the back in Belgrade. It just doesn't make sense for me to have Matt Doherty, who we all know is much better going forward, behind a Seamus Coleman, who's much better defensively. And so for me, even though Seamus, as you say, Seamus could well be playing in that position for Everton for the next few weeks. And Matt Doherty, he got 45 minutes today. Hopefully he'll get more time at right back or for Spurs. But even having said all that, it still just makes more sense, or it just doesn't fit right with me that Matt would be behind Seamus on the pitch, given their respective strengths. So for me, it's Seamus at right back and probably Matt somewhere further forward.
Yeah, well, let us know what you think in the comments. The comments are